Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Cambridge Union Society. Welcome to our 5th debate of term. This is going to be a very exciting debate, a very topical debate. This is a debate on the American election, very near and dear to some members of the audience. I will keep my own opinions to myself. However, the motion tonight is simply this House would re-elect Obama. So on the left side of the House we have the proposition, and appropriately on the right we have the opposition. Tonight's debate is being recorded, so if you speak at any point during the debate, please wait for a microphone to reach you. There'll be people walking around, there'll be stewards in yellow jackets with microphones. Wait for a microphone to reach you before you speak, and then and also do wait to be called on to speak. The speakers have 10 minutes each. The first minute and last minute are protected, so we ask you not to interrupt during that time, but during the middle 8 minutes, you're welcome to jump up and say on that point or point of information if you'd like to interrupt and have your voice heard. But I remind you, it's the speaker's time. They've come a long way to speak here, so please do respect them if they choose not to take your point. I'm trying to think what else I have to say. If there are people in overflow rooms, in rooms other than the chamber, and you'd like to make a floor speech at any point, please tweet it at the Cambridge Union Society. Hashtag PIP if it's a point in proposition. I'll let you figure out what the other two are. So we're going to have 4 speeches. As I said, 4 speeches, 10 minutes each. Then we'll open it up to speeches from the floor, 1-minute speeches, proposition, opposition, and abstention. And we'll have the final 2 speakers close off the debate. Just one quick reminder before we do get started, and that is, please silence your mobile phones. Maybe put them on vibrate if there's something really, really important. But if you can silence them, it's really hard for the speakers when they keep getting distracted by, I don't know, the Beastie Boys or something. So on that note, I don't think there's anything else for me to remind people of. Okay. On that note, we're going to open tonight's debate with Dr. Jeffrey Miley, who's a lecturer in sociology here at Cambridge. Dr. Miley?
Okay. Well, thank you guys for having me here. Let me just get ready here. So I would begin by saying that trying to defend Obama is a bit difficult because of the fact that his election 4 years ago led to implausibly high expectations, and these implausibly high expectations about what an Obama presidency would mean have given way to disenchantment in many quarters. So in a sense, Obama has been the victim of unrealistic expectations. For one thing, the depth of the disaster he inherited should not be forgotten, both in terms of the foreign policy fiasco of the war in Iraq and in terms of the financial crisis. Still, some clear accomplishments are worth noting. To begin with, he's displayed leadership in a time of economic crisis. His rescue of the auto industry and other forms of stimulus prevented the deep recession he inherited from becoming a second Great Depression. Second, he's passed significant pieces of domestic legislation. Most noteworthy, the hard-fought sweeping healthcare reform, the so-called Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, which made healthcare available to approximately 32 million Americans who couldn't get insurance before. Third, he's extended important civil rights to disempowered groups. This includes, for example, the Hate Crimes Prevention Act of 2010, which made it a federal hate crime to assault people based on sexual orientation, gender orientation, gender identity. Furthermore, he repealed the clearly discriminatory Don't Ask, Don't Tell military ban on openly gay service in the military for openly gay people. And finally, he passed, as his first piece of legislation, he passed the Fair Pay Act, which is a crucial and important advance for gender equality, ensuring equal pay for equal work. So those are 3 important accomplishments. And fourth, we shouldn't forget, he fulfilled his campaign promise to end the disastrous war in Iraq and has pledged to end the war in Afghanistan by 2014. So those, I think, are all genuine accomplishments that need to be recognized and shouldn't be underestimated. But admittedly, his record does not add up to the high expectations for change which his election had generated. Could he have done more? And in my mind, his record would be significantly better had he pursued a more consistent, more principled, perhaps, more courageous set of policies. For example, had his stimulus packages been more robust? Had his response to the economic crisis more generally displayed less subservience to the interests of Wall Street vis-a-vis Main Street? Had his healthcare reform been less accommodating to private health insurance interests? And in terms of the so-called war on terror, many outside of the US in particular, I think, are rightly disappointed by the fact that, for example, he's failed to shut down Guantanamo, He's been supporting his support for kidnappings and indefinite detentions without trial, as well as another disappointment. His decriminalization of torture and his recourse to drone assassinations. All these, I think, need to be on the table as their disappointments with his administration. However, Obama's culpability on these fronts should not be exaggerated. This because it must be recognized that he is operating within a highly problematic, broader political climate, political culture, we can say, and a highly defective political system. There are systemic constraints on his leverage as president over the policy-making process, and I think people outside of America, you guys have a better insight into this than people in America who are stuck inside of it in a sense. First, so let's talk about these systemic constraints, and they need to be recognized in terms of the power of special interest in American politics, in particular that of big corporations, as well as the foreign policy establishment, and also in terms of the division of powers between the Congress and the presidency, okay? So these defective characteristics of the American political system, I believe, greatly contributed to Obama's partial failure to live up to what were very high and I think unreasonably high expectations for his first term. And let us not forget that since 2010, in particular, he has consistently faced an obstructionist Republican majority in Congress. Okay, so I think this point about the systemic obstructions to Obama's ability as leverage to make the kind of change that people expected need to be taken seriously. But ultimately, such apologies for Obama's at least partial failure to live up to the unrealistic expectations that met his election are less important than the simple fact that his Republican opponent Mitt Romney is, for lack of a better word, atrocious. Regardless of what you think of Obama's record of his policy stance, a Romney administration would undoubtedly be much worse, in some respects, most likely catastrophically worse, on a host of important issues, from attacking Iran, to Supreme Court appointments, to the economy, to women's reproductive rights, to health coverage, to the safety net, to climate change, green energy, and the environment. Indeed, it is not an exaggeration to insist on multiple issues. The Republican organization, the Republican Party today, is extremely dangerous, not just to the United States, but to the world at large. For this reason, it's worth expending some effort to prevent their rise to power, even if we harbor few illusions about the Democratic alternative, what a second Obama administration might do. Given that we're dealing with a literate audience here, and something you can't take for granted in the United States, but we can here, a simple enumeration of several of the main planks of the Romney-Ryan electoral platform should suffice to prove the point about just how extreme the Republican option is. Sure.
Isn't the motion that this House would re-elect Barack Obama, not elect Mitt Romney? And isn't that a crucial distinction in this debate?
Sure, it's a crucial distinction, but there's two options. So if you think Romney is atrocious, this is a good and the best reason, in fact, to vote for Obama. Because it's not Obama versus some ideal vision of what Obama might have been, but Obama versus who he's really up against. Okay? So let's talk about these, point by point. Terrorism. Romney insists that there should be no constitutional rights for foreign terrorism suspects. He doesn't consider waterboarding to be torture. And he's altogether nonchalant about the protection of basic civil liberties against the excesses of the so-called war on terror, a fact which bodes particularly problematic for the future of civil liberties in the United States of America, since he could well have the chance of appointing up to 3 Supreme Court justices to a currently divided court on these issues. Militarism. Romney would increase spending on the armed forces, adding almost $100 billion to the already extremely bloated Pentagon budget by 2016. In terms of foreign policy more generally, he's been consistently belligerent. Romney appears to present a clear U.S. military threat to Iran and has spoken in permissive terms about Israel's right to act unilaterally against Iran's nuclear facilities. Romney associates himself closely with hardline Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, pledges more military assistance to Israel, and agreed with Israel's position that Jerusalem is the capital, disregarding the Palestinians' claim to the eastern sector. He's also branded Russia the #1 geopolitical foe of the United States. So on issue after issue, in sum, a Romney victory in terms of foreign policy would signal a return to the go-it-alone, cowboy-style, reckless administration of the Bush administration. And given the dangers that we face in the world, in the very volatile regions in the world, I think that's just too great of a risk. Okay? Now, then there's the crucial matter of energy and the environment. Romney's campaign is heavily supported by big oil and coal, and so not surprisingly, he advocates extensive offshore drilling. Moreover, he would undo regulation to reduce toxic pollutants like mercury and to address carbon pollution. He would gut investment in renewable energy. And he says green power has yet to become viable, and the causes of climate change, according to him, are unknown. So these are all very irresponsible, short-sighted instances of the capitulation of the common good and the future sustainability of life on the planet, in fact. When we turn to look at his economic policies, beginning with the issues related directly to debt and dealing with the crisis, we see more examples of extremism. For one, he opposed the auto bailout, which saved the economy. Moreover, he's proposed a rigid cap on federal spending, which would surely entail further spending cuts on threatened vital government programs. And he favors constitutional balanced budget amendment, which would greatly constrain the crucial capacity of the federal government to respond to crisis with counter-cyclical stimulus packages. In short, Romney subscribes to the discredited neoliberal trickle-down voodoo economic formula. He advocates lower taxes for the rich and less regulation. He endorses keeping Bush-era tax cuts and cutting corporate tax cuts even further. However, he fails to specify which tax breaks or programs he's going to cut to help cover these costs. Meanwhile, he proposes repeal of the law, toughening financial industrial regulations after the deregulation that caused the meltdown that caused the economic crisis to begin with. So on issue after issue, in a nutshell, with respect to the economy, Romney advocates tax cuts for the rich, who won't spend them, and slashing spending for the poor and the middle class, who will be forced to cut back. These policies are not only very unfair, they're also very dangerous. They're likely to result in a simultaneous deficit explosion and a double-dip recession. And finally, when we turn to look at the Romney-Ryan platform in relation to social rights, again we see clear evidence of counterproductive, unjust extremism. In terms of the right to health care, in terms of gay rights, in terms of reproductive rights. In terms of immigrant rights, on all of these issues, he favors basically a very reactionary platform. And the list goes on and on. So to conclude, the Romney-Ryan policy platform speaks for itself. The Republicans are dangerous extremists. They are belligerent and reckless on foreign policy. They continue to be ideologically committed to the discredited neoliberal economic policies of deregulation that caused the current economic crisis. And they are violently opposed to the extension of basic social rights for the protection of vulnerable and disempowered groups. Republican far-right extremism renders the re-election of President Barack Obama a matter of considerable urgency, not only for the United States of America, but also for the world at large. Obama is no Superman, to be sure, but the fact remains that the Republican alternative could well prove catastrophic.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miley. To open the debate for the opposition, we have Ryan Bourne, who is the head of economic research at the Center of Policy Studies. Ryan, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President, and it's great to be back in Cambridge to take part in this debate this evening. Can I just start by saying the auto bailout, GM are currently going to lose the US taxpayers $35 billion. If you consider that a success, sir, I'd hate to see a failure. Now, in 2008, President Obama won handsomely in what was an historic election, promising, if you remember rightly, to fundamentally transform the United States. Yet, whatever the result next week, millions of voters look set to switch allegiance to Mitt Romney. And over the past 4 years, it's become clear to Americans what Barack Obama's transformation entails. And it's a philosophy of big government. It's a philosophy in the politics of envy. After Americans took this on board through Obamacare and the "you didn't build that" comment, his economic support vanished. Americans are suspicious of big government, and they're right to do so. They're right not to have confidence in the president on the economy. On his own terms, Barack Obama has failed, but he has also failed, more importantly, to provide the economic leadership necessary to deal with America's long-term challenges. Now, of course, the president did face a tough economic inheritance, particularly in the financial sector. How could we forget? He tells us every time he makes a speech. But extraordinary measures were taken to prevent that meltdown, starting with George Bush. But where the president's gone differently is that he's believed significant government borrowing and intervention would stimulate the American economy into a self-sustaining recovery, something that liberal economist Paul Krugman, when he was writing in 1999, considers absolute claptrap. We had the $800 billion so-called stimulus, various schemes like cash for clunkers, his crony capitalist bailouts of the auto industry, and many other government interventions. And it's clear, if you look at the record, that Barack Obama hasn't worked. America usually bounces back very quickly from recessions. Liberal economies always do. This recovery has been extremely slow. The president told us we'd see growth of 3.2% in 2010, 4% in 2011, 4.6% in 2012, i.e. growth speeding up. What have we actually seen? 2.4%, 1.8%, even less this year, growth slowing down. On unemployment, it was said it would peak at 8% and fall to 5.4% by now. Actually, it peaked at 10% and is now officially around 8%, higher than Obama said it would be if the stimulus hadn't been made. In other words, America is 9 million jobs short of where the president suggested it would be, and 4 million private sector jobs lower than the pre-crisis peak. How on earth, given these scenarios, can the president say the private sector was doing just fine? But even these figures understate the stagnation, ladies and gentlemen. President Obama promised hope, but 3 million Americans have lost all hope and are so discouraged by the state of the labour market, they've given up looking for work altogether and don't even count on the unemployment rolls anymore. Imagine that. In the land of the free, the home of capitalism, it's got a jobs market with virtually no recovery since the official end of the recession. And families are being squeezed as a result. Yes, I'll take.
I believe The Guardian reported today that just this month in October, 158,000 jobs had been created. So I think you probably need to sort of review the facts that you're working with.
Check the GDP figures. Where have the jobs been created? Lots of government spending, unsustainable, as I'll get to later on in my speech. 47 million people on food stamps. Median income's fallen to levels last seen in 1995, ladies and gentlemen. Slow growth, high unemployment, discouraged workers, costly stimulus, a weak private sector. Mr. President, that is not an economic record to be proud of. And all this before we turn to the public finances. In 2008, President Obama promised to halve the deficit in 4 years. He called the Bush deficits unpatriotic. Yet his deficits, have been over $1 trillion every year, making George Bush's look modest. Federal government debt has increased by $6 trillion in one term, an almost unbelievable sum. And economic research on this is absolutely clear. High debts equal economic stagnation. The US has to deal with its debts. America's outlook on unchanged policies is absolutely frightening. Entitlements alone exceed federal revenues within 3 decades on unchanged policies. They need a plan, and they need a plan now. Now, President Obama could have made up for his record of failure by providing leadership to deal with these problems, but he hasn't. He set up the Simpson-Bowles Commission to look at tax, spending, and entitlements. It actually offered quite a wide scope for bipartisan reform. Yet President Obama, unlike Bill Clinton in the 1990s, proved unable to deliver the leadership to make these recommendations happen. But don't take my word for it, ladies and gentlemen. Listen to Larry Summers, who worked for both President Obama and President Clinton. He said, Clinton basically loved negotiating with a bunch of politicians about anything, whereas Obama, he really didn't like these guys. Likewise, let's listen to Obama's Treasury Secretary, Tim Geithner, when he's speaking to Paul Ryan in an official Congress function. We're not coming to you to say we have a definitive solution to the long-term problem. What we do know is we don't like yours. A remarkable statement indicative of the lack of responsibility taken by this administration for the future of America's economy. Yes.
Surely you can't compare the diplomatic records of 2 presidents without considering who was on the other side in terms of who he was negotiating with. The Republicans of Bill Clinton's era were very different to the Republicans of today.
Well, the Republicans and the Tea Party got quite a big mandate in 2010. Barack Obama should respond to the people, but I would say that President Clinton was actually having to deal with Newt Gingrich during the 1990s. So I'm not sure you can call him a left-winger. President Obama's inability to deal on these bipartisan reforms came to a head during last year's debt ceiling standoff. And Ben Woodward has written a book on this. He shows the president aloof, difficult to deal with, and unable to foster good relations with congressional colleagues. The grand bargain with Republicans fell through. Obama said, I want a huge hike in taxes. Completely off the table in the end. And in the end, it was up to congressional leaders to thrash out a deal amongst themselves. On that point? Yes.
Alex Williamson, Trinity Hall. I think getting wide bipartisan support, if you're Barack Obama, is very difficult with a Republican Party that has set out deliberately and openly to try and obstruct every single thing he does.
Again, the Republicans had a big mandate in 2010 to block Barack Obama's policies. Barack Obama's got to work with that. Leaders lead. Barack Obama is not leading. I'll make progress. His budgets, meanwhile, have been the subject of absolute ridicule. Erskine Bowles, President Clinton's former chief of staff, who described Paul Ryan's budget, by the way, as sensible, straightforward, honest, and serious, described President Obama's as, I don't think anybody took that budget seriously. Little surprise, ladies and gentlemen, that Barack Obama's budget got voted down 97-0 in the Senate. So what we see, Mr. President, is President Obama, a man who we thought would be this transformative figure, reach over bipartisan lines, offered a new kind of politics. Actually, what we've got is somebody with a very poor economic record and who's been extremely divisive and unable to deal on America's long-term challenges. Now, what about the alternative? What about Mitt Romney? He's not my ideal candidate. He's got faults. But what he knows is that America could and should be doing better. His ticket at least recognises that America does have a jobs crisis, and jobs can only be created sustainably by business, not government. They need to be granted the conditions to flourish with policies for real growth, tax, education reform, free trade, getting debts under control, and market-driven energy policies. But most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, Romney has actually shown in his career that he can work with others. He ran a very successful Olympics, and in direct contrast with Obama, worked well with a legislature dominated by the other party during his time as governor of Massachusetts. Yes.
Jackson Kane, Selwyn College. When Mitt Romney was governor of Massachusetts, Massachusetts ranked 47th in the country in job creation.
It shows the constraints of a Democrat legislature, I'm afraid. Look at Mitt Romney's record. Don't look at what the mainstream media say to you. Look at Mitt Romney's record. He's a moderate Republican who has delivered in business and public service. So this motion asks us to debate whether we would re-elect Obama. Economically, I would say Americans have lost confidence in him. Look at the opinion polls. Look who's winning on the economy. It's Romney every time. They've lost faith in his big government ideology, and they've lost faith in his ability to lead on economic sustainability. It's in all of our interests to have a prosperous America, shining the way for economic liberty. So I urge you to vote against this motion tonight.
Thank you very much, Ryan. To continue the debate for the proposition, thank you. To continue the debate for the proposition, we have Hadley Freeman, a columnist from The Guardian. Hadley?
Thank you, Mr. President. So as has already been said earlier in this debate, this question about whether Obama should be re-elected has two sides. It's first, should he be re-elected, or should we elect the other guy? And if this debate is going to be anything other than academic, theoretical, evening-filling kind of debate, we need to actually seriously discuss who the opposition is. Now, my opponent over there just described Romney as I believe you said a liberal conservative, a moderate conservative. Now, whether Romney ever really was this moderate conservative that he appeared to be during his time as governor of Massachusetts and earlier with his professed support of abortion and his passing of an impressive healthcare bill in his state is really a debatable issue. And in any event, he has truly jettisoned such ideals in order to kowtow to the socially and economically conservative beat beast that the Republican Party has become since the Bush presidency in Romney's single-minded pursuit of becoming president at any cost. Any thought that Romney was only paying lip service to the hard right in his party in order to be elected was quashed when he chose Paul Ryan as his vice presidential nominee, a man who co-sponsored a bill last year that argued abortion should be made illegal even in cases of rape and incest. It was also Ryan who was the original co-sponsor of the same bill that introduced the term forcible rape, a concept which discounts statutory rape, incest, or instances in which the woman raped has been drugged or has limited mental faculties, all of these suggesting that he doesn't really believe those women are raped. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how little the man who Romney chose as his running mate cares about women. And that is something that everybody... And that is the man who would be a heartbeat away from presidency if Romney got in. And this should concern every single person in this chamber, because it's already been proven this year, the attitudes to abortion that we've seen in America coming from the far right come to the UK through the Conservative Party. This is something that doesn't just concern women, it's men and women, it's a family issue, and it should concern all of you. Ryan also believes that millionaires should be given tax cuts and influenced by his partial reading of Ayn Rand, that the poor and needy should be seen as weak parasites. Romney has very much followed suit, tacking to the hard right on abortion, gay rights, climate change, gun rights, immigration, and tax cuts. He would roll back women's rights absolute decades, taking funding away from Planned Parenthood and reinstating a ban on federal funds going to foreign family planning organizations. His knowledge of foreign policy has proven limited to his offshore tax accounts and annoying allied countries on his travels. Both Romney and Ryan promote the theory that individualism, an Ayn Rand-style individualism, is the true American way, with their nonsense about who built it and that complete spiel they spilt this summer. They believe that a collective helping of the masses, such as universal health care, is tantamount to communism, or at the least suspicious European socialism.
Does it not concern you that the precedent that's been set with Obamacare is that actually the federal government can force you to buy a product, and actually that could be used by Republicans in future for means that you perhaps might not like?
Does it not concern you that there are at least 30 million Americans who are at risk of losing their health insurance if Romney gets in? Americans who can't afford dentistry, who can't afford any health care. If you call an ambulance in America and you don't have any health insurance, you automatically have to pay about $800 before you get taken to hospital. That's what concerns me.
John Miller, Clare College, rather. I'd like to make a point about how the system of governance actually works in the U.S. Perhaps you are unaware that there's also 435 members of Congress that are up for election and 33 in the Senate, and that a repeal of the Health Care Act isn't contingent on who is elected president.
It's not necessarily contingent on who's elected president, but depends who the president is in charge, depends on what can go forward and how much more forward that act can go. If Obamacare is repealed, it will be very hard for that ever to come back under a Mitt Romney presidency. With Obama, once a health care becomes an act, once it becomes nationalized, it almost is never retracted. Why not? Okay. Romney and Ryan support a system in which 40% of the wealth would go to 1% of the population. Romney's refusal to show his tax records for the past 2 years is a perfect example of the greed and lack of interest in collective good that underpins this theory. But this is not the American way, despite what they say. On the FDR Memorial in Washington, D.C., the following words are written. The test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide for those who have too little. Yet Romney is, and always has been, incapable of having any empathy towards people who aren't like him, i.e. anyone who's not a wealthy white man. And this is why he fits in very well in today's Republican Party. Back in 2003, when he was allegedly the moderate bipartisan governor of Massachusetts, he spoke out against gay couples having children and insisted that the birth certificates of those children were doctored in such a way that they would almost certainly cause those same children's problems throughout their lives when applying to schools, for example, or getting driver's licenses. He was punishing those children for having parents who are different from Romney. Now let's go to the original motion, why you should vote for Obama. Now I apologize if there's any repetition with my co-debate here, Dr. Miley. When Obama took office in 2008, The Onion, America's satirical newspaper, ran the headline, "Black Man Given America's Worst Job." And this was a very fair assessment. Obama inherited a country that was nearly on its knees thanks to the ineptitude of the Bush presidency, with 2.5 million jobs lost in 2008 alone. And the recovery back has not been easy. But even faced with an utterly intractable opposition whose focus has not been the good of the country, but rather to derail Obama's presidency, he has made remarkable strides and restored the standing of America in the eyes of countries around the world after the disaster and shame of the Bush years. The stimulus helped create 3.6 million jobs in 3 years. He saved the car industry. He captured and killed Osama bin Laden, something Bush, with all of his grandstanding, was never able to do. He signed the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, protecting women, minorities, and the disabled from pay discrimination, something that is completely anathema to the Romney administration. And most of all, he achieved the heretofore impossible, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. If Romney wins, this act will be repealed. And once again, Americans who lose their jobs will have to fear that they will not have protection, that their families will not have health coverage. If Obama wins, 30 million Americans will be protected and will have the kind of health coverage that people in this country can take for granted. And he will be able to continue the good works that he's only just been able to get started on, not least focusing on something in which Romney has no interest, climate change. We've seen only this week in New York, where I grew up and where until last month I was living, the effects of climate change and how it really affects Americans. And yet, in this whole debate, and I blame Obama for this too, in none of the debates was climate change mentioned. In 10 years' time, that will seem insanity. This is something that the Democrats know they have to debate, that they've been scared of mentioning, and now is the time for Obama to do that. Until the Bush era, America represented in the eyes of most in the Western world a country that celebrated modernity, multiculturalism, equality, social justice, and community. Romney stands for the opposite of all that. Obama understands all of that, and he stands for all of them and more. He is the president that America deserves and needs.
Thank you very much, Hadley. To continue the debate for the opposition, we have Alex Singleton, who runs a public affairs firm and is a former Telegraph journalist. Alex?
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, great to be here. I actually supported Obama in 2008. I wrote a piece on the Telegraph website, very much endorsing him. I was even one of the volunteers who did an all-nighter at the Telegraph HQ. It gets very cold at 4 in the morning, because I was excited by Obama. I thought, hey, this is a guy who will unify America. I thought President Bush had been terrible. I thought President Bush's father had been terrible. In fact, to my mind, the only good US president in the last 2 decades has been Bill Clinton, who created jobs, who reformed the economy, who did many good things, who created international agreements. He created a trade agreement with Mexico that's been very successful, that's relieved poverty in Mexico, and has created prosperity for Americans. So I'm not here today to be some sort of gung-ho Republican. I actually think over the past 2 decades, the Democrats are the only side that have provided a decent president. But I have to say that I am disappointed with Obama. To me, I thought he would unify the country. I thought it was actually quite useful symbolically that he would be the first black American president after the horrendous segregation in America's past. I thought it was a good symbol. But you know what? It's one thing to be a symbol, but you also actually have to deliver. And this debate today, which I have to say is not about Romney, it is about, and it's not just about whether Obama should be re-elected. It's about whether this House would re-elect Obama. And in this House, most of us, I presume, are British. We're certainly here in the United Kingdom. And so what I want to talk about is what Obama means to the United Kingdom. And I have to say, he has spent the last 4 years attacking and devaluing the special relationship, a relationship that has been built over centuries. In fact, this relationship goes back to our common law system. It goes back to the legal systems that have evolved since Anglo-Saxon times. And I shall talk about that in a moment. But let me just go through some of the snubs that he has made to this country. When Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, Gordon Brown went out to Washington and was keen to have good relations with Obama. 2009, Obama hadn't been in power all that long. And Obama refused to have the customary press conference with Gordon Brown. He refused to have the customary dinner that you have with another major head of government. And Gordon Brown turned up with a very elegant gift. It was made out of wood, something for Obama's desk to hold pens. And it was actually really appropriate. You giggle, but it was actually really, really appropriate because it was made out of the same wood from the same fleet of ships that Obama's desk, which has been in the Oval Office since the 19th century, that desk from the sister ship, Gordon Brown got some wood from the sister ship. It's a really thoughtful present. Obama gave him a DVD box set. And this DVD box set contained Psycho. Now, don't know about you, but that seems rather strange. And then when Obama came over to Britain and came to Buckingham Palace, he gave her, not something, made out of silver. Normally, heads of government give other heads of government something elegant with an engraving on it. Obama gave the Queen, an iPod with his speeches on it. I'm sure Her Majesty was riveted by these speeches and listens to them frequently. But it's just, a little bit of a snub every so often. No, it's okay. I'll take some from the audience. But Obama sided with Argentina over the Falklands, calling for negotiations. He took Argentina's side and just parroted what was coming out of Argentina, saying that there needed to be new negotiations over the sovereignty of Argentina. Turning his back on American policy that's existed. In January 2011, he called France America's greatest ally, really snubbing the special relationship. He's been pro the EU. Louis Sussman, the US ambassador to London, warned the UK that all key decisions must go through Europe. The Vice President, Joe Biden, described Brussels as the capital of the free world. And whenever they talk about transatlantic relations, it always used to be the case that that meant Washington and London. Now, they are very overt about the fact that they do not regard transatlantic relations to be between Washington and London. It's Washington and Brussels. And when the Sunday Telegraph asked the US government, asked the State Department, the Foreign Office in Washington, why it was that Gordon Brown was being rebuffed, the State Department told the Sunday Telegraph, "There's nothing special about Britain. You're just the same as the other 190 countries in the world. You shouldn't expect special treatment." That is Obama's foreign policy. And the other part of Obama's foreign policy, which I find offensive, is that he has betrayed even his own loyalist supporters on civil liberties. This is a guy who promised endlessly to end Guantanamo. And frankly, what I mentioned a moment ago about the common law that's evolved in England and made its way over to the US. And one of our most important principles that was fought with blood, we got the Magna Carta, which said that no free man shall be arrested or imprisoned or deprived, dispossessed, outlawed, exiled, or deprived of his standing in any other way except by the lawful judgment of his equals. And Obama has betrayed that, just like President Bush did, please do.
Can you just wait for a microphone, please?
Chris Watkins, St. John's College. Is it not true that when Obama tried to have a terrorist suspect tried in federal court in New York, Republicans created such a furor over that point, legitimizing the terrorist, that he was forced to actually send him back to be court-martialed in military court instead?
What we do know from the WikiLeaks is that at least 150 people who were imprisoned illegally and against international law, if you believe in such a thing, certainly against our principle of common law, at least 150 of those people were completely innocent. These are people who may well have been tortured, who may well have been waterboarded. And it's one thing to say there are lots of people out there who will be in favour of torture, there are lots of people who will be in favour of waterboarding, but this debate is about Obama. And Obama has allowed the evil of Guantanamo to continue. And worse, he has stepped up President Bush's drone attacks. Actually, it's 6 times as many attacks as Bush did in his 8 years. He's killed many, many times more people than Obama. The Pakistani government voted, the parliament voted in Pakistan to ban the US from doing drone attacks. And President Obama has just ignored the parliamentary democracy of Pakistan. Please do.
Sorry, you don't seriously think Romney would stop drone strikes or close Guantanamo? I mean, he said he won't.
The point of this debate is not about Romney, though. It is about Obama. No, seriously, we are in a debate about whether we think Obama deserves a second term. And it is always the case in elections that people go to the ballot box and they vote according to whether they think that the current incumbents deserve more time or whether they're fed up. You know, people threw out the Labour Party at the last general election in this country, not because they thought that the Tories or the Liberal Democrats were going to be marvellous. They threw them out because they were fed up. We throw out, in democracies, we tend to throw out governments rather than elect alternatives. So I think on these various, if we look at foreign policy, we can see that on many respects that this House, here in England, here in Britain, has many reasons not to vote for Obama. The continued offensive anti-British approach that he takes. Constant snubs, last minute, constant snubs, and the fact that he hasn't lived up to his promises. It's all very well to say, oh, but Romney will carry on the drains. Well, so will Obama. So you've not actually got a choice there. It's not that Romney will be worse. Romney will be exactly the same. And if you look, well, it's true. You see, Romney is one of these politicians who says, oh, I'm a liberal, you can trust me. Then he gets in power, and he doesn't do it. So, you know, you've got a choice. Are you going to vote to re-elect the person who's failed, who's betrayed all of his so-called liberal promises, or are you going to throw him out of office? And I would encourage you today to throw him out of office. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex. Now is your opportunity to have your voice heard. Well, not yet, not yet. Give it a moment. Thank you. Now is your opportunity to have your voice heard. We're going to be taking speeches 1 minute only, and we're going to try to keep you to 1 minute, alternating proposition, opposition, and abstention. We'll take a few rounds because we're actually running very, very good on time tonight. And also, if there is anyone following us on Twitter, you're welcome to tweet at us at Cambridge Union Society. You know all the hashtags. So, to keep matters brief, if you do get chosen to speak, please wait for the microphone, start with your name and college, and keep it to a minute. I will start interrupting you at a minute. So, is there a 1 minute speech in proposition of the motion, this House would re-elect Obama? Not that many. Yes, over here.
David Michelson, Emmanuel College, and more recently of Washington, D.C. I believe that regardless of the opponent and regardless of the ideals of the Republican Party or their motives behind them, I believe the president on his record deserves re-election for a variety of reasons, namely that he has been, with little contest, the most successful domestic policy president, at least since the Johnson administration and arguably since the Roosevelt administration. I believe that you cannot, as the first opposition presenter had contended, malign him for being a poor economic projector of how policies might work in or against, but in fact, we do know what the numbers are today. And we do know that we've seen jobs decrease over the first 6 months of his presidency, as with the 6 months before, and grow every month since. We've seen a record with Keynesian economic policy that has surpassed that of European austerity proposals and European austerity plans here.
Thank you very much, but your time is left. Thank you. Is there a 1-minute speech in opposition of the motion? Don't be shy.
The proposition, like
name and college, please.
Michael Dungochen, Trinity College. The proposition, rather like President Obama's national campaign, have resorted to scaremongering about Governor Romney's policies. On social issues, Governor Romney will not outlaw abortion. Why? Because in order to do so, Roe versus Wade would need to be overturned. In order for that to happen, 3 specific people in the Supreme Court would need to die. And that would only mean states were allowed to hold referenda on abortion. However, Mississippi held a referendum on abortion. It was defeated 65-35. This is Mississippi, ladies and gentlemen. On taxation, Governor Romney does not have a $5 trillion tax cut for the wealthy. Obama's campaign has admitted as much. What he wants to do is reduce overall rates while getting rid of some of the loopholes that fill America's 40,000-page tax code. Governor Romney on healthcare, believes, as President Obama does, in no discrimination against pre-existing conditions and children staying on their parents' plans till they're 26. But he wants to address systemic problems with the system by introducing competition to the system, whereas President Obama's solution to long-term problems with the cost of Medicare is just to appoint a committee.
Thank you very much. Your time is
tried and tested leader, and he deserves better than distortion.
Thank you very much. We're going to continue now with 1-minute speech in abstention of the motion that you don't want to re-elect Obama, but you don't want to not re-elect Obama. Do you want to start up here, please? If you could just wait for a microphone to reach you. It's on its way. Can you start with your name and college, please?
Pardon?
Name and college.
I'm Julia Stukalina. I'm from Robinson College. The proposition appeared to have made an awful lot of the fact that Obama faced challenges as president, that he faced a highly combative Congress and that he faced an economic crisis. But I would submit, isn't that what we elect presidents for? To face challenges? I'd say that, it's sort of part of the job description to deal with these sort of problems. FDR pulled America out of one of the worst recession in its history, and he's considered one of its most popular presidents. Surely Surely a remarkable president would have overcome these challenges instead of being hindered so strongly by them. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a 1-minute speech? I'm sure there is, but is there a 1-minute speech in proposition of the motion? I'm just going to see if there are any tweets first. We have no tweets. Okay, in that case, I'm going to start on my left, because that does seem more appropriate. Yes, please, in the blue-green shirt. Yes.
Jessica Murray, LGBT rep of Murray Edwards. I think the last person to speak closed by saying that a person wouldn't vote for Obama due to a feeling of fed-upness and feeling kind of a bit meh about the whole thing. Well, I'd have to say that as a educated, NHS-loving, female, black, lesbian, I'd be a little bit more than fed up under the rule of Romney.
Thank you very much. Is there a 1-minute speech in opposition of the motion?
My name is Felix. I'm a white male from Sydney Sussex College. Now, I really don't know why I bother doing this, because it seems like an act of self-flagellation to stand up and say I wouldn't re-elect Barack Obama, because most of this country thinks the sun shines out of the man's arse. But hell, I'm going to do it anyway. I think, actually, a large amount of this debate hasn't focused on what the motion actually is, and I did try and make that point before. Mitt Romney is irrelevant and intangential to this debate. The point is, would we re-elect Obama? Not whether we would re-elect Romney. We could pick another candidate, Jill Stein from the Green Party, Garrett Johnson from the Libertarian Party. It's not a two-party choice. And no, Obama has failed. Obama has failed economically. He's failed on the war of terror. He's failed to shut down Guantanamo. He's killed US citizens without trial. He's launched drone strikes on people in Pakistan and other countries, killing innocent civilians in an unjustified war, which hasn't even got congressional approval. On the economy,
thank you.
He hasn't met his job numbers. He hasn't achieved the levels of growth he said he would. Obama has failed.
Thank you very much for that. Is there a 1-minute speech in abstention of the motion? In the back there.
Reuven Shirazi, Gonville Keys College. I'm going to abstain because I don't have the cheek to tell America, another country, and indeed, importantly, a former colony who seriously invested so much energy and lives to revolt against British power. I don't have the cheek to tell them who they should elect as their president. And it's clear that in this country we would have Obama as our prime minister if he was standing. It's obvious from all the polls that we've seen and the cheers in this room. And I'm not saying I think Romney should. I don't have an opinion on the matter. But it's clear in America they have a different culture and a different collective ideology. And we should not try and interfere in their ideology and tell them who they should vote for. We wouldn't like it if our arch nemesis, the French, told us, their student union told us that they think David Cameron, they give him a ringing endorsement and he should be our prime minister. So let's not interfere in another country's election.
Thank you very much, Reuven. Now, I think we have enough enthusiasm and enough time, because we're running pretty well on schedule, to do another round of floor speeches. Before we do, I'm going to ask the 6 speakers, do any of you have a very quick response you want to give to any of these speeches? No? Okay.
Well, I would say, in response to the idea that...
Do you have a microphone still on? Right?
Oh, I don't actually anymore. David's on.
Well, we've got one for you then.
First of all, in response to the idea that this motion is not about should Romney be elected, if this is not going to be, as I said, just an academic debate, the fact is it is a two-party election right now, and the choice is between Obama and Romney. And secondly, to argue with my direct opponent over there, the idea that Obama is bad for the special relationship, I would remind him that the one time Romney came to this country this summer, he caused huge outcry, managed to insult the Conservative Prime Minister and the Conservative Mayor in London. So the idea that Obama is bad for the special relationship, I would say that to not re-elect him, that would be a lot worse.
I'll take that. Thank you. I believe we have a quick response from you.
Not on that point, but there seems to be a $16 trillion elephant in the room here. I mean, everyone says they like all of these social programs and they like all of this healthcare. Well, the Good Samaritan didn't just have good intentions, he had money. And if the US continues to rack up debts in the way that it is, their economy is going to grind to a standstill within 20 years. Look at the projections, they're absolutely frightening. And Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney are the only candidates in this election who actually intend to try and reduce that debt to GDP ratio.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Before we do continue, I believe you need to head out. It's 5 past. I mean, you could probably stay. We'll be another 25, 30 minutes. Okay. Is there a 1-minute speech in proposition of the motion? Oh, wow. Yes, please. Can we get a microphone just down from that end?
Mary Irene Lang, Corpus Christi College. I think there are several things that we need to consider. One is that we have been talking about this divide in this political climate for Obama, but we haven't quantified it. And in June of this year, a Pew study came out that said that the divide in America is not just a divide, it is a chasm. America has never been more divided in the time that the Pew study has been looking at this issue. I would also remind this House that while we've been talking about the economy, Goolsbee from the Chicago School of Economics said the president has basically nothing he can do about the economy. It's a very popular thing to say on a speech, but there's not that much that can be done, and I think that we need to consider the most important thing that a president can influence, and that's the social policy.
Thank you very much. We have one tweet, which is a point in opposition of the motion, so I'm actually going to ask one of the opposition speakers to read it. Do you have your microphone on? If you'd like to read out that tweet.
It's from @John_Sharples, and he says, at Cambridge Union, in square quotes, leading, end square quotes, is BO's only mode. It's the dirtier work of doing deals and winning people over that he's hopeless at.
Thank you. On to that bombshell. Is there a 1-minute speech in opposition of the motion? I see someone up there. I saw this, in the back. There's someone that had their hand up in the back here. No? You've given up? In that case, you're next.
Okay, Albert Beardo, Christ College. Now, if you want to look what Obama's America is like, look at California. It's got all the great things the proposition argue for. It's got green jobs, Hollywood, Silicon Valley, but it's also got over 10% unemployment. It's got very unaffordable housing in the main cities. It's very difficult for unskilled people to get a job. It's got cities in the interior going bankrupt all over the place, people losing their houses, crime rates going up. It spends one of the highest amounts per teacher in education of every state, but it has some of the lowest results. In the meantime, if you want a Republican vision for America, look at Utah or Texas, which, by the way, have lower inequality than California, in spite of the significantly lower taxes. It's been able to attract and accommodate many hundreds of thousands of immigrants. It's got affordable housing. It's got jobs for unskilled people. That is what America would be like under Romney. So make your choice.
Thank you very much, Albert. We have also a pair, it's sort of a set, 2 tweets in proposition, so I'll ask someone from proposition to read that out. Would you like to? I think it's this one goes on to that one. It's a double tweet.
Freddie Dyke, despite Alex's love for the rule of law, has he missed the alternative to Obama, seemingly holding the belief that being suspected of terrorism means you have no constitutional rights?
Thank you. I think those were switched. I think one of them should have been point in opposition and the other point in prop. Thank you very much. Finally, to close off the floor speeches, is there a 1-minute speech in abstention of the motion? I'll give that to you then.
Chris Sutton, St. John's College. I just have to say that I'm really rather disturbed at the House and that this fine institution, that you would have such strict voter ID laws where I have to show a picture ID in order to cast my ballot. So I can't vote here.
Okay, on that note, I'm going to take that back. On that note, we're going to return to the main speakers tonight. To close off the debate for the proposition, we have Professor Tony Badger, who is Master of Clare College and a Professor of American History.
Thank you, Mr. President. The last time I attended a debate in this chamber was in December 1965. And I am pleased to know that the standard of eloquent speeches and adversarial debate continues. Whether this is actually healthy for democracy is a different matter. I start with a view that after 50 years of studying American politics, I've been seldom more depressed than I am at the current state of politics in the United States. And we're dealing with an election which should not be close. It shouldn't be close, first of all, because Obama won the election in 2008 got control of Congress, had the best voting record in terms of the popular vote of any Democratic president except for Franklin Roosevelt and Lyndon Johnson. And he blew that through a lazy and sloppy administration on the one hand, which is his fault, but then the dysfunctional system of politics that currently exists in the United States on the other. So that was the first reason it shouldn't have been close. Second reason it shouldn't have been close is the Republicans should be walking it with an unemployment rate of 8%. No incumbent president has been re-elected with that unemployment rate since Franklin Roosevelt in 1936 with an unemployment rate of 16%. And then finally, it shouldn't be close because you remember those Republican primaries last February. I was actually in hospital in Salzburg watching CNN International and the only channel I could understand. And I had the disturbing privilege to watch the Arizona Republican presidential debate. And you've got to remember who those people were, the anything but Romney candidates that surged ahead every time that the Republican base thought they couldn't stand Romney any longer. Michelle Bachmann, who believed that the Muslim Brotherhood has infiltrated the State Department. Rick Perry, who could not remember the names of the 3 cabinet departments he wanted to abolish. Newt Gingrich, disgraced former speaker, 3 times married, converted Catholic. Herman Cain, African-American pizza salesman. Rick Santorum, a member of Opus Dei, who the last time he ran as an incumbent was defeated by the largest measure of defeat that any incumbent senator has had in the previous 25 years. And Romney had to make so many concessions in order to get the... Can we get the microphone?
I just wanted to ask you about John Huntsman, who was previously the ambassador of the United States to China and spoke fluent Mandarin. He was another option, and he's someone who you didn't bring up, so I wanted you to address that one if you could.
Well, because by the time of the Arizona Republican debate, he was no longer a viable candidate. He was a candidate in the race, but he wasn't a viable candidate the Republican base had any intention of supporting. Obama then spent more money than any incumbent president at this time of the electoral cycle on negative campaign ads designed to make Romney unelectable by the start of the campaign in September. He was following the tactics of George Bush in 2004, making Kerry unelectable really before the campaign started. And it worked. And then you had September, and then you had all the Romney disasters in September, and then you had the first debate, and Obama blew it again. So we have a very dismal future for American politics at the moment. And as we've already heard, so seldom has American politics been so polarized, seldom have both parties catered to their bases. But at the end of the day, whatever Ryan says about Paul Ryan and Romney having an answer to the budget deficit, the latest study by Thomas Mann and Norman Ornstein, 2 people employed by the American Enterprise Institute, a conservative think tank, who summed up the American political system at the moment. It is even worse than it looks. And they put the finger of blame, particularly on budget deficit reduction, at young guns in the Republican Party, who would rather risk a government shutdown, or a default than compromise. And if we think back to Franklin Roosevelt, as one of the speakers said, Franklin Roosevelt deserves the credit for getting the country out of the Depression. Who supported Franklin Roosevelt in 1933? Progressive Republicans, people from the other party. That didn't happen this time.
Points of information. In the early 1930s, the British government decided to take a very different policy to Franklin Roosevelt. They cut spending drastically, and the UK economy actually recovered from 1933 and went on to achieve quite strong growth for the rest of the decade.
But if you look at the growth, first of all, in 1933, you didn't have a British unemployment rate of 25 to 33%. And secondly, if you look at the growth rates of the American economy, 1933, 34, 35, they're unprecedented in American economic history. Roosevelt's only mistake was to stop spending in 1936. Despite all of Obama's mistakes, he deserves to win. It's very important for those of us who love America that he wins. And contrary to what Alex says, it's very important to us in Britain that he wins. Why should this House re-elect Obama? We've had a lot of discussion. Jeff very eloquently discussed the economic achievements of Obama. And it does have to be put back into that context of early 2009 when we faced global economic meltdown. It's difficult to remember just how close to complete collapse some of the major financial institutions in the world were in January 2009. And however much it rankles, we bailed out the banks, they rescued the auto industry, they brought in the stimulus. Modest amount of economic growth could have been better. It could have been better with a more constructive opposition. Romney has a plan. It's an austerity, a small estate tax cut plan. They say that this would give business confidence to invest. What more confidence does business need? Some of the lowest tax rates in the Western world, continued lowest and assured interest rates. What business needs is confidence that there's going to be consumer demand to buy the products that business can produce, and that won't come through an austerity program. Romney emphasizes that he's a businessman. Well, he's a businessman who's been successful with inherited money. And the two... And successful businessmen aren't actually necessarily good presidents. The two most successful businessmen who've been presidents in the last century are Herbert Hoover and Jimmy Carter. Obama needs to be elected because he has a responsible and measured foreign policy. The more I heard Alex's description of Obama's foreign policy, the more I liked it. And it does contrast to the arrogant unilateralism of the previous administration and the swagger and bluster of his opponent. Finally, Obama deserves to be re-elected eventually because he represents a policy of inclusion, whether that's poor women, racial minorities, gays, union workers, above all, immigrants. It's a policy of inclusion that includes that 47% of the country. Sorry?
On that point.
Yes.
David Back from St. John's. As a state legislator in Illinois, Barack Obama was in favor of gay marriage. As a United States senator, presidential candidate, and president, Barack Obama was opposed to gay marriage. However, he claimed that over time his opinion evolved. It seems his opinion evolved from for against for. Would you say that these policies of inclusion, how deep-seated are they? Are they actually policies of principle?
I would have thought that if you look at Obama's record compared to most politicians in the United States, and certainly compared to his opponent, it's a lot more principled and consistent than the others. And I would have thought if you look at his opponent, and you look at the lily-white Republican Party that represents a policy of exclusion that appeals to the worst, not the best, in the American people. But finally, Obama's victory would represent a victory for religious tolerance and a defeat for the forces of anti-intellectual fundamentalism.
Religious...
Albert, the microphone.
Yeah. Is that religious tolerance which doesn't allow religious institutions to follow their religious beliefs when, say, giving out healthcare?
He doesn't mandate them to, he doesn't mandate them to go against their political beliefs. He mandates them not to accept federal money and then follow policies which are incompatible with government policy. And what I would say finally about the influence of religion in American politics is precisely that point. The opposition accuse Obama of an assault on religious liberty. It is virtually impossible to imagine that this administration is representing a serious assault on religious liberty when you look at the activities of the religious right in the last 25 years. Obama may be accused of being too detached at times. He does not have the instinctive knowledge that Roosevelt had, that it is impossible to over-flatter an American congressman. And unlike the patrician Roosevelt, he cannot persuade ordinary Americans that as a president he understands that their boss is a son of a bitch. An Obama victory will not bring dramatic change. No elected president has had a successful second term since the Civil War. But at a time when American politics represents a dialogue of the deaf, conducted at a level of mega decibels, it is important both for America and for us to have calm, rational decision making. Obama can provide that. There is no evidence that his opponent or the party that he represents can do so. I urge this House to re-elect Barack Obama.
Thank you very much, Professor Badger. Finally, to close off tonight's debate, we have Robert Works, who is an MPhil student in Latin American studies. Robert.
That's right. Okay. Well, I guess I should begin by simply saying to my friend Jeff, and I'm a little upset that Hadley left, that I do come in peace, that I'm not dangerous, and that I do also like women. But with that being said, and I like Tony too. He's a fantastic guy. I actually agreed with him on a lot of things. And, you know, many of the distinguished speakers today in this chamber have talked a bit about what Obama has meant to the world and what he meant to us. How he ushered in a new era, an era of change in foreign policy, and how this election, or that election, ushered in a new universe of possibilities for a lot of disadvantaged youth, people that were not part of the system. I find myself largely agreeing with the speakers, but the immense outpouring of goodwill both domestically and around the world now lies fallow. Particularly so in Europe, where a Pew poll conducted between 2008 and 2012 found that most Europeans now identified China as the leading global economic power. And here in Britain, it's something like 58%. With that being said, the same poll shows that countries with an unfavorable opinion of Americans and American culture still largely view the United States as the leading economic power. So with that being said, it's kind of odd, right? I mean, if you like us, you don't think we're viable to be the economic power, and if you don't, you do. With that being said, my question is, where's the goodwill gone? Tony talked a bit about this, Professor Badger, I should call him, not Tony. But my real point is, when you know, to even our closest allies, we kind of see us being viewed as a bygone power. I think it's clear that while the president is popular both at home and abroad, he has wasted his popularity to truly chart a new course for the United States, precisely the one he promised. An America that fairly participates within the international community, and one that looks to solve global problems, not just cause them. Now, America is, as it were, more than its president. Our economic leadership depends on the sum total of our efforts. Americans working and striving to improve the lot of their families and of their communities. Maybe our friends across the pond and around the world got it right. Maybe we are in second place in this sense. Maybe we are drifting out of control. But how is the administration's inability? This is a product of the administration's inability to make good on the goodwill afforded to us. Think about this. Poverty. 1 in 6 Americans now live in poverty. 46 million in total. We're at a 17-year high in female poverty rate. Inequality, perhaps the most staggering of all. In 2002 to 2007, the top 1% garnered 65% of all income generated in this period. From 2009 to 2011, 93% of that income went to the top 1%. This is a record. We have to look at the record. This motion is about the president and re-election. I don't see that trending. As Americans watch their pensions and 401ks disappear, lobbyists and government insiders co-opted the enactment of new legislation, but completely gutted it. I mean, they turned these opportunities for real and positive change into legislation concerned with locking in corporate profit. This is a metaphor of what has happened during the administration's watch. Inequality has extended into an inequality of opportunity. whereby the working families seek to achieve themselves becomes an elusive, moving target, perpetually behind the opportunities a fair and free market society should make available. Let me be clear, as we sit in this chamber and attend one of the finest academic institutions in the world, we often find ourselves bothered, absorbed by numbers, statistics, and what these numbers tell us. But these are not just numbers, they're real people, real working families. They're real individuals trying to make a better life for themselves, but also trying to make a better life for their children. And let me say again, 1 in 6 of them are in poverty, 47 million total. The middle income families at their lowest rate ever. The middle class at its lowest rate ever. Yes?
Why then do you suggest that we don't elect the only statesman at the current time speaking out against these atrocities? Why do you suggest we elect the person who says he doesn't care about 46% of the population, they're not worth being represented?
It's a fair point. Yeah. That's a fair point. That's a fair point. But what I am telling you is between the period that we're analyzing with the Barack Obama administration, we have 93% of all income growth going to the top 1%. And I thought it was pretty bad during the Bush administration. But this is pretty bad. I mean, this is staggering. So that's the answer to my question, or your question. Now,
Can I say?
Yeah.
So why do you want to have
sorry.
someone who would make it worse?
Did you give him?
I'm sorry. Everything I have mentioned thus far is, of course, not the sole product of the administration by any means. And as other speakers have already mentioned, the Republican Party has largely stymied the president's legislative agenda. Some Republicans, especially those in Congress, have zealously opposed the president's every move. I come from Kentucky. My senator is Senator Mitch McConnell. He's the guy that said our number one priority is to not elect him. That came from my state. But above this, it exists a superstructure. There's a den of lobbyists and pressure groups that coalesce around specific issues of importance, moneyed interests, and the citizens, and they're excluding individuals even more so today. And the numbers indicate this. And this is in the Democrat and Republican Party. I would suggest to you that we understand the president's fitness for re-election on what the future holds. The 2008 Barack Obama versus the 2012 Barack Obama. This is about the re-election of a president. We should look at his record. Let me tell you a little bit about it. On climate change, the administration has handed out leases to big oil and gas companies to drill in the United States, and 72% of these leases remain idle. The president today is going around telling everybody that drilling production in the United States is the highest level in history. Now,
I do accept your $16 trillion elephant in the room, but you have just given us a load of reasons why it's not entirely his fault because of Congress. What then do you want in your president? Don't you think that when Chris Christie, one of his fiercest critics, this week has come out and praised his handling of this crisis when Mitt Romney's been nowhere to be seen, that's what you want from your commander-in-chief?
okay, but that's not exactly the point. I mean, the point is about the re-election of Barack. I mean, that's a fair point. I think that we should say that he did a good job with Sandy. I'm not saying that he's not doing a good job with that. And I haven't said anything about 16 trillion debt, actually. Well, with that being said, I'll just get back to what I'm talking about. There are places in the Midwest that people can actually, this is back to the oil thing, okay, so it'll sound a little bit strange. There are places in the United States that actual oil fracking has had such an impact that people can actually light their water on fire. And this is a fact reported widely across the United States. So in Latin American studies, we call these kind of people petro. We use the word petro presidents or presidentes de petróleo. Well, I would say this is a pretty good example of one. And to make matters worse, the EPA under the administration has delayed air emission standards by 2 years for natural gas operators. Our president told us that he would break our dependence on fossil fuels, but now he's telling us that it's at the highest level, and we're at the highest level of defense in history. Okay, the defense data, a little bit about defense. In his first 3 years, Obama's unleashed 268 covert drone attacks. 3,000 people have been reported killed, 4,000 United States citizens, and 800 civilians, all without due process. This is the largest unmanned aerial offensive in military history. In one case, the leader of Pakistani Taliban, we tried 4 times to kill him, and it killed, in the process, 30 civilians. We finally got him. But I mean, these are the tolls. While Obama has drawn down forces in Iraq and Afghanistan, he has shifted warfare to a state of being removed from the American people. This is a war that nobody can really judge. So think about this, 3,000 people dead, and we're not even talking about it on a large scale.
On that point.
Go ahead.
this all may be true, but at least Obama has pledged to reduce the defense budget over the next 4 years, unlike Romney, who has pledged to increase it by $100 billion. Surely these stats will only be getting worse under Republican presidency.
Yeah. That's probably the case, but the reality of the situation is Barack Obama has also increased the defense budget during his administration, which he told us in 2008 he wouldn't do it.
On that point.
Yes.
Are you a Republican?
I'm sorry?
Sorry, can I just clarify?
I'm debating the motion.
You're debating the motion?
Yes.
Do you support Mitt Romney?
I'm sorry? No, do I support Mitt Romney?
Yeah.
As the alternative, I do support Mitt Romney, yes. With that being said, while Obama has drawn down force in Iraq and Afghanistan, the war has shifted to a new level of warfare that we're not even discussing. 3,000 people have disappeared off the globe, and who is going to be held accountable for this? War has to be connected to people, it has to be connected to civilizations, it has to be connected to power, and this idea, the drones are not connecting it. Let me close. I just want to say a couple things. I did take a lot of points of information, so you should reward me later with drinks in the bar. With that being said, when you decide how to vote tonight, please consider the motion. I think it's very, very important. This is about the next 4 years, but at the same time, it's not about Mitt Romney. Now, Hadley had made a good point. If we're going to engage in academic banter, she made this point about pragmatism and this. That's relevant, but you're not in a polling booth. This is about the re-election of the president. And I think if you look at what he has promised us, I think we should look at 2008, and I'm talking about his key promises. Climate change, warfare, these are major issues. Domestic policy, look at the inequality rate. Like I said, these are individuals, these are people. 1 in 6, 46 million Americans. This is unbelievable. The highest rate. And what's it worth? Okay, unemployment has gone down. And all growth that has been created, 93% of it has been taken by the top 1%. And it was 65 under Bush. So, I mean, the trend is not going quite well for the president. So based on that simple motion, I would just ask you to maybe for the first time vote against the president. I'm not asking you to choose Mitt Romney when you walk out of here. I'm asking you to choose the re-election of Barack Obama. So with that being said, vote against the motion. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I let everyone go, just a few things. First off, thank you for tonight's debate. The election, as you all do know, I hope, is Tuesday night, and if you want to watch the results come in live right here in the Union, free of charge, open to members, non-members. We're going to have the bar and food going all night long until we know who's going to be running that country for the next 4 years. If you could please allow the speakers to leave the chamber before you stand up, you'll have a chance to meet them in the bar. We just need to get them out first. Thank you all for tonight's debate, and I hope to see you in the bar.